The wagon train rolled away in a cloud of dust that burned Zelda Vance's eyes, though she told herself it was only the desert wind that made them water as she stood beside her tattered carpetbag in the middle of nowhere Arizona territory, watching the only family she had left disappear over the brown horizon without so much as a backward glance. Her sister-in-law Martha had made the decision final that morning, standing rigid in her faded calico dress, while Zelda's brother Thomas couldn't even meet her eyes. "We cannot afford another mouth to feed, Zelda. You are 24 years old and barren. No man will have you now, and we have our own children to think about. Perhaps you can find work in Ash Fork. It is only 5 miles north." 5 miles might as well have been 500 when you were a woman alone in 1878 with nothing but 37 cents, 2 dresses, and a heart that had finally learned to stop hoping for things it could never have. The physician in St. Louis had been blunt 3 years ago when he examined her after her broken engagement. "Your anatomy is such that you will never carry a child to term, Miss Vance. I am sorry, but any man deserving of heirs should know this before entering into matrimony with you." James had broken their engagement within the week. Her parents had died of cholera the following winter. Thomas and Martha had tolerated her presence until their own family grew to 5 children in a cramped wagon heading west, and tolerance had transformed into resentment, then abandonment. Zelda picked up her carpetbag, adjusted her bonnet against the relentless Arizona sun, and started walking north. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, all scrub brush and red earth and rock formations that looked like God had gotten angry and thrown stones at the ground. Her boots, already worn thin from the journey west, kicked up small clouds with each step. She had been walking for perhaps an hour, her throat dry and her shoulders aching from the carpetbag, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. Zelda turned, shading her eyes, and saw a lone rider approaching on a big bay horse. Her first instinct was fear because women alone on empty roads had reason to be afraid, but as the rider drew closer, she saw he was leading a second horse that appeared to have gone lame. The man who reined in beside her was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore a dusty brown hat, a worn shirt, and leather chaps marked with years of hard use. His face was weathered but not old, perhaps 30 or so, with eyes so dark they were nearly black and a jaw that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. "You are a fair distance from anywhere to be walking alone, miss," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like he did not use it often enough to keep it smooth. "I am heading to Ash Fork," Zelda said, lifting her chin despite her exhaustion. "I have business there." Those dark eyes studied her for a long moment, taking in her worn dress, her single bag, the absence of any supplies for a journey. "That is still 3 miles ahead. You have water." She did not answer, which was answer enough. He dismounted in one fluid motion, pulled a canteen from his saddle and held it out to her. "Drink. Not too fast." Pride warred with thirst, and thirst won. Zelda took the canteen and forced herself to sip slowly, even though she wanted to drain the whole thing. The water was warm but tasted better than anything she could remember. "Thank you," she said, handing it back. "I will be on my way now." "My horse pulled up lame a mile back," the man said, nodding toward the limping bay. "I am leading him slow to my ranch. It is closer than Ash Fork, just off the road ahead. You can ride the other horse and I will take you into town afterward." "I do not accept charity from strangers," Zelda said. "Not charity, common sense. Woman alone on this road will be vulture bait before sunset if the heat does not take her first, and I do not need that on my conscience." He paused, then added, "Name is Samuel Garrett. I run cattle and horses north of here." You can ask anyone in Ash Fork about me if you are worried about my character." Zelda considered this. She was tired, desperately thirsty despite the water she had drunk, and he was right about the danger. "Zelda Vance, and I can pay for the transport." Something that might have been amusement flickered in those dark eyes. "Keep your money, Miss Vance. Come on." He helped her onto the bay horse with a courtesy that surprised her, handed her the reins, then took the lead rope of the lame horse and started walking. Zelda followed, grateful to be off her feet even if her pride stung at needing the help. They walked in silence for a long while. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Zelda watched Samuel Garrett's back, the way he moved with an easy strength despite the heat and the long walk. He offered her water twice more without making her ask for it. "You have people in Ash Fork?" he asked eventually. "No, I am seeking employment." "Doing what?" "Whatever is available. I can cook, clean, so I can read and write and do figures." He glanced back at her, those dark eyes unreadable. "You come out here alone to find work." Zelda felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. "My circumstances are my own business, Mr. Garrett." "Fair enough." He turned his attention back to the road. After another few minutes, he said, "My housekeeper quit last month. Moved to California with her daughter. I have been making do, but the place needs a woman's hand. I can offer room, board, and $30 a month if you are interested." Zelda stared at his back, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You do not know anything about me. I know you got dropped off in the middle of the desert with nothing but a carpet bag, and you are still walking with your head up. I know you got manners and you can speak proper." "That is more than I knew about Mrs. Henderson when I hired her." He paused. "I am not home much during the day. Ranch keeps me busy from dawn to dark most times. You would have the house to yourself, do the cooking and cleaning, tend the kitchen garden. It is a fair offer." It was more than fair. It was a miracle. Zelda swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in her throat. "Why would you help me? You do not know me." Samuel Garrett stopped walking and turned to look at her fully. His expression was serious, almost stern. "Because everybody needs help sometimes, Miss Vance. Because I got a house going to ruin without someone to tend it, and you got skills and need work. That is reason enough." They looked at each other for a long moment. Zelda saw no deception in his face, no hidden motives lurking behind those dark eyes. Just an odd kind of lonely weariness that she recognized because she carried the same weight. "All right," she said quietly. "I accept your offer, Mr. Garrett. Thank you." He nodded once and turned back to the road. "It is Samuel. Nobody calls me Mr. except the banker when he wants me to know I owe him money." Despite everything, Zelda felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Then you may call me Zelda." The Garrett Ranch appeared over a rise in the land about 30 minutes later. It was more substantial than Zelda had expected. A solid adobe house with a real wood porch, a large barn in good repair, several corrals with sturdy fencing, and what looked like a bunkhouse set back from the main buildings. Horses grazed in one pasture and she could see cattle dotting the hills beyond. "You run this yourself?" she asked as they approached. "I got 3 hands who work for me. Good men." "They bunk out there," Samuel said, nodding toward the bunkhouse. "They know to respect any woman on this property." "You will have any trouble, you tell me." He helped her down from the horse with the same quiet courtesy, then led both animals toward the barn. "Come on. I will show you the house once I see to these horses." Zelda followed him into the barn, which was dim and blessedly cool after the brutal sun. She watched as Samuel examined the lame horse's leg with gentle, competent hands, running his fingers down the tendons and checking the hoof. There was something calming about his movements, unhurried and sure. "Just a stone bruise," he said finally. "He will be fine in a day or two." He tended both horses with quiet efficiency, and Zelda found herself studying him in the barn's shadows. He was a handsome man in a rough-hewn way, all hard angles and weathered strength. But it was more than that. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel inexplicably safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. When the horses were settled, Samuel led her to the house. Inside, it was cooler than outside but clearly showed the absence of a woman's care. Dust covered most surfaces, dishes were piled in the dry sink, and the floors needed sweeping. But the house itself was well built, with real glass windows, a large fireplace, a proper cook stove, and furniture that was simple but sturdy. "Your room would be through there," Samuel said, nodding toward a door off the main room. "It has a bed and a bureau. Nothing fancy." Zelda opened the door and found a small but clean bedroom with whitewashed walls and a window that looked out toward the mountains. After months of sleeping in a crowded wagon with her brother's family, it looked like paradise. "It is perfect," she said softly. "I will leave you to settle in," Samuel said. "I got work to see to, but I will be back around sunset. Kitchen has some supplies if you want to make yourself something to eat. Make yourself at home." He left before she could thank him again, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Zelda stood in her new room, her carpetbag still in her hand, and felt tears finally spill over. But these were different tears than the ones she had fought back watching the wagon train disappear. These carried relief and gratitude and the smallest spark of something that might have been hope. She spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the kitchen, taking inventory of supplies, and starting to set the house to rights. There was flour and cornmeal, coffee and sugar, dried beans and salt pork. A decent garden grew behind the house with tomatoes, squash, and herbs that had been fighting a losing battle with weeds. Zelda tied back her skirts and spent an hour weeding and watering, feeling the familiar satisfaction of putting things in order. By the time the sun started sinking toward the horizon, she had beans soaking, bread dough rising, and a pot of coffee on the stove. The main room was swept, the dishes washed, and the table set for two. She was stirring a pot of stew made from salt pork and vegetables from the garden when she heard boots on the porch. Samuel came in with two other men, all of them dusty and tired. He stopped short when he saw the transformed room, something crossing his face that Zelda could not quite read. "This is Zelda Vance," he told the other men. "She is the new housekeeper. Miss Vance, this is Charlie Ross and Tom Henderson. They work for me." Both men pulled off their hats. Charlie was young, maybe 20, with sandy hair and a friendly face. Tom was older, perhaps 50, with graying hair and kind eyes. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Vance," Charlie said. "That coffee smells mighty good." "It will be ready shortly," Zelda said. "Dinner as well if you gentlemen would like to eat here tonight." Samuel shook his head. "They got their own place, but I appreciate the offer." He looked at the other men. "That is all for today. I will see you at dawn." After Charlie and Tom left, Samuel washed up at the pump outside, then came back in and sat at the table. Zelda served the stew and fresh bread, poured coffee, and sat across from him with her own plate. It felt strange and intimate, eating alone with a man she had met only hours ago, but Samuel seemed content to eat in silence, and she was too tired to make conversation. "This is good," he said finally. "Best meal I have had in a long while, thank you. I will make a proper shopping list tomorrow if you tell me what you prefer." "I am not particular. Whatever you think is fine." He finished his coffee, then looked at her directly. "I should tell you something, Miss Vance. I am not looking for a wife. I had one. She died 5 years back in childbirth, along with the baby. I am not interested in trying again. This is just employment, room and board and wages. I want to be clear on that so there are no misunderstandings." The words were blunt but not unkind. Zelda felt a sharp ache in her chest, both for his loss and for the assumptions he was making. "I understand completely, Mr. Garrett. Samuel, I am also not seeking marriage. I cannot have children, and I learned in Missouri that makes me unsuitable for the institution. This arrangement suits me perfectly as it is." Something shifted in his expression, a subtle easing of tension she had not realized he was carrying. "Then we understand each other." "We do." They finished the meal in more comfortable silence. Samuel thanked her again, then excused himself to his own room on the other side of the house. Zelda cleaned the kitchen, banked the fire, and finally retreated to her small bedroom as full darkness fell outside. She lay in the narrow bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, and thought about the strange turn her life had taken in a single day. She had been abandoned by her last remaining family, left to die in the desert, and then saved by a stranger who asked nothing from her but honest work. Samuel Garrett was a hard man to read, all walls and careful distance, but he had shown her more kindness in one afternoon than her own brother had in 3 years. Zelda closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under, too tired even to worry about what tomorrow might bring. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Zelda rose before dawn to start coffee and make breakfast. Samuel would eat quickly, thank her, and disappear until sunset. She spent her days cleaning years of bachelor neglect from the house, tending the garden, cooking, baking, and slowly making the adobe structure into something that felt like a home. Samuel was true to his word about being gone most of the day. He worked his ranch from sunup to sundown, coming back only for the evening meal and usually so tired he could barely speak. But he was unfailingly courteous, always thanked her for the meals, and paid her at the end of the first week exactly as promised. Charlie and Tom were friendly when she saw them, tipping their hats and offering to help with heavy work. Charlie especially seemed to enjoy talking, telling her stories about the ranch and the territory while he repaired the fence around her garden. "Samuel is a good man to work for," Charlie told her one morning. "Fair and honest. He has had a hard go of it since his wife died, though. Keeps to himself too much." "How long have you worked here?" Zelda asked, handing him a glass of water. 2 years now." "Tom has been here since the beginning, helped Samuel build this place up from nothing. It was just empty land when Samuel bought it 6 years back. He and his wife, Rebecca, they built the house together." Charlie took a long drink. "She was pregnant when she fell from a horse. Went into labor too early. Neither she nor the baby made it." Zelda felt her heart clench. "That is terrible." Samuel took it hard, real hard. He loved her something fierce. Charlie shook his head. "But he is better now than he was. Having you here might help. House has been too quiet too long." After Charlie went back to work, Zelda stood in the garden and thought about Samuel Garrett. She understood loss and grief, understood the weight of carrying something broken inside you. Maybe that was why he had helped her. Maybe he recognized a kindred spirit. A month passed, then 2. The house transformed under Zelda's care. Curtains appeared in the windows, made from fabric she found in a trunk. The floors gleamed, the kitchen sparkled, and the smell of fresh bread and good cooking filled the rooms. She planted more vegetables, started some flowers, and even coaxed the scraggly rose bush by the porch back to life. Samuel said little, but she caught him sometimes looking at the changes with an expression that might have been gratitude or might have been pain. She could not tell which. It was late September, the heat finally breaking into something almost pleasant, when things between them began to shift. Zelda was in the kitchen making preserves from the last of the summer fruit when Samuel came in midday, which was unusual. He had torn his shirt on barbed wire and blood seeped through the fabric at his shoulder. "You are hurt," Zelda said immediately, abandoning the preserves. "It is nothing, just a scratch. Sit down." It was not a request. She fetched clean water and bandages, made him take off the ruined shirt and clean the wound. It was deeper than a scratch, but not terrible, a long gash that had bled freely. She worked efficiently, cleaning and bandaging, very aware of his bare skin under her hands, the solid warmth of him. "You are good at this," Samuel said, his voice rougher than usual. "I tended my parents during the cholera. I learned to manage." She tied off the bandage. "You should change this tomorrow. Come find me if it looks infected." "Yes, madam." She looked up and found him watching her with an expression she could not name. For a moment they were very close, her hand still on his shoulder, his dark eyes locked on hers. Something electric seemed to hum in the air between them. Then Samuel stood abruptly, reaching for his shirt. "Thank you. I should get back to work." He left quickly, and Zelda stood alone in the kitchen with her heart pounding for reasons she did not want to examine too closely. After that day, things felt different. Samuel started coming back to the house around midday, usually with some excuse about needing to check on something or get a tool. He would accept a cup of coffee, and they would talk, stilted at first but gradually more natural. He told her about the ranch, about raising cattle and horses in this hard country. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her parents, carefully editing out the painful parts about James and her brother. "You never talk about why you were alone on that road," Samuel said one afternoon. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun paint the rocks orange and gold. Zelda had brought out coffee and some of the sugar cookies she had made, and Samuel had stayed longer than usual. Zelda was quiet for a long moment. "My brother and his wife were part of a wagon train heading to California. They decided I was a burden they could no longer afford and left me outside of Ash Fork." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Because you could not have children. It was not a question." Zelda wondered how he knew, then remembered what she had told him that first night. "Yes, I am considered damaged goods, useless for the primary purpose women are supposed to serve." "That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard." The vehemence in his voice startled her. She looked over to find him staring at her with something fierce in his eyes. "A woman's worth is not in her womb," Samuel said. "You are smart and capable, and you work harder than most men I know. You have made this house into a home again. You have value that has nothing to do with bearing children." Zelda felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent 3 years believing she was fundamentally broken, fundamentally less than other women. Hearing someone say otherwise and mean it shook something loose inside her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Samuel reached over and covered her hand with his own, rough and warm. "I mean it, Zelda." They sat like that as the sun set, hands touching, something fragile and precious growing between them. The weeks that followed brought a change in their relationship that neither of them spoke about but both felt. Samuel found more reasons to be near the house. Zelda found herself watching for him, listening for his voice, feeling something light and warm unfurl in her chest when he smiled at her. He started teaching her to ride, putting her on his gentlest mare and walking beside her until she found her balance. His hands on her waist as he lifted her into the saddle made her breath catch. The approval in his eyes when she managed a trot made her feel like she had conquered the world. She learned about his life in fragments. He had come west after the war, trying to escape memories of battles he would not talk about. He had met Rebecca in Prescott, married her within 6 months, and spent 3 happy years building the ranch before losing her. He had sworn he would never love anyone again because the pain of losing Rebecca had nearly destroyed him. "But then," he said one evening as they stood in the barn, watching a mare nurse her new foal, "I found you in the middle of the desert, and nothing has been the same since." Zelda turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Samuel met her eyes. "I mean you make me remember what it feels like to want something besides just getting through another day. I mean when I wake up in the morning, I look forward to seeing you. I mean I think about you constantly when I should be thinking about cattle and fences and all the 100 things that need doing on a ranch." Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "Samuel, I do not think that is a good idea." "Why not?" "Because I am your housekeeper. Because we agreed this was just employment. Because I cannot give you children if you change your mind and want them." Samuel stepped closer. "I do not want you because you might give me children, Zelda. That is not why I want you. I want you because you are brave and kind and you make me laugh. I want you because this house feels empty when you are not in it. I want you because when I imagine my future, you are in it." "I am barren," she said, the word bitter in her mouth. "I cannot ever give you a family. I do not care." His voice was fierce. "Do you understand? I do not care. There are 100 ways to make a family that have nothing to do with bearing children. We could adopt orphans. We could foster children who need homes. Or we could just be the two of us, and that would be enough. That would be more than enough because I have lived without you and I have lived with you and I know which one I prefer." Tears were streaming down Zelda's face now. "Samuel, I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of believing you, of trusting this, of losing it." She wrapped her arms around herself. "James broke our engagement the moment he learned I was barren. My own brother abandoned me. How do I trust that you will not change your mind?" Samuel took her face in his hands, gentle but sure. "Because I am not James or your brother. Because I know what matters and what does not. Because I already fell in love with you, Zelda Vance, and there is no changing my mind about that. You love me." Her voice was barely a whisper, completely. She kissed him. She had not planned to, had not thought about it. But suddenly her lips were on his and his arms were around her, and it felt like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. He kissed her back with a desperate tenderness that made her believe, finally, that maybe she was not broken after all. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me. We barely know each other. I know everything that matters. Marry me, Zelda. This is insane. Maybe, marry me anyway," she laughed, a sound of pure joy that felt foreign and wonderful. "Yes. Yes. All right, I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later by the circuit preacher who came through Ash Fork. Zelda wore a new dress that Samuel had insisted on buying her, pale blue cotton with ivory lace, and carried wildflowers that Charlie had picked that morning. Tom and Charlie stood as witnesses, along with the general store owner and his wife. It was small and simple, and it was the happiest day of Zelda's life. The wedding night was tender and sweet, Samuel careful with her inexperience, murmuring how beautiful she was, how much he loved her. Zelda had been taught that the marriage bed was a duty women endured, but Samuel made it a gift, something shared and precious. She fell asleep in his arms feeling treasured in a way she had never imagined possible. Their married life fell into a different rhythm, one marked by shared work and shared joy. Zelda still ran the house, but now Samuel was there more often, helping with heavy tasks, sitting with her in the evenings, reaching for her hand or stealing a kiss when the mood struck. He made her laugh with dry observations about his cattle. She made him talk about feelings he had kept locked away too long. They fit together like two pieces of the same puzzle, different but complementary. The loneliness that had marked Samuel's house lifted, replaced by something warm and living. Neighbors started stopping by more often, drawn by the smoke from the chimney and the signs of life. Zelda made friends with other ranch wives, women who welcomed her into their circles without judgment or questions. It was at one of these gatherings, nearly 6 months after her wedding, that she met Eleanor Williams. Eleanor ran a small orphanage in Prescott, a ramshackle operation fueled by determination and not much else. She had come to Ash Fork looking for donations and found Zelda instead. "We have 12 children right now," Alina told her over coffee at the Ash Fork Hotel, "ranging from 3 to 15 years old. Some lost their parents to disease or violence. Some were simply abandoned. We do our best, but resources are limited." Zelda listened, thinking about her conversation with Samuel about family. What do the children need most? Everything. Food, clothing, education. But mostly, they need someone to love them. Several local families have taken children, but there are always more who need homes. "Could you come out to the ranch? I would like my husband to meet you." Alina came the following week. Samuel listened to her talk about the children with an expression that grew softer and more open as she spoke. When Alina finished, he looked at Zelda, and she saw her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. "We would like to meet some of the children," Samuel said. "We have been talking about expanding our family." They made the trip to Prescott 2 weeks later. The orphanage was exactly as Alina had described. Too small, too poor, but filled with children who deserved better. Zelda walked through the rooms, her heart breaking and expanding at the same time. In the back corner, she found a boy of about 8 sitting alone, reading a battered book. He had dark hair and serious eyes and a wariness that spoke of hard experience. "Hello," Zelda said softly. "What are you reading?" The boy looked up defensive. "Tom Sawyer, Miss Alina lets me." "That is a good book. I am Zelda." "I am Jacob." Samuel came up behind her and Jacob tensed, but Samuel just crouched down to the boy's level. "I read that same book when I was your age. What part are you at?" Slowly, cautiously, Jacob started talking about the book. Samuel listened with genuine interest, and Zelda watched the boy gradually relax. By the time they left an hour later, Jacob had smiled twice and shaken Samuel's hand. "He needs a home," Zelda said as they rode back toward Ash Fork. "I was thinking the same thing." They talked to Alina, went through the necessary paperwork, and brought Jacob home to the ranch a month later. He was quiet and cautious at first, watching them both as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Samuel was patient, teaching the boy about horses and cattle, never pushing, always steady. Zelda cooked his favorite foods, helped him with his reading, and gave him the first room of his own he had ever had. Slowly, Jacob bloomed. The wariness faded. He laughed more. He started calling them Ma and Pa without even seeming to realize he was doing it. And Zelda discovered that she could love this child just as deeply as if she had borne him herself. A year later, they went back to Prescott and met Sarah, a 5-year-old girl with bright red hair and a stubborn streak a mile wide. Her parents had died of fever, and she had been at the orphanage for 2 years, too spirited for most prospective parents. Zelda fell in love with her immediately. Sarah came home with them, and Jacob was thrilled to have a little sister. He taught her to name all the horses and helped her collect eggs from the chickens. Sarah adored him and followed him everywhere, chattering nonstop. The house that had been so quiet and sad when Zelda first arrived was now filled with the sounds of children laughing, arguing, playing. Samuel would come in from work and scoop Sarah up, making her shriek with delight. He would help Jacob with his schoolwork, patient even when the boy struggled. He would pull Zelda aside and kiss her until she was breathless, whispering how much he loved the life they had built. "You gave me everything I did not know I needed," he told her one night as they lay in bed, the children asleep down the hall. "You did the same for me," Zelda said, pressing close to his warmth. "You made me believe I had worth when everyone else said I did not. You always had worth. I just helped you see it." 3 years after Jacob came to live with them, they added another child to their family. Thomas was 10, half Apache on his mother's side, and had been at the orphanage only a few weeks when they met him. His father had been killed in a mining accident, his mother dead from tuberculosis. He was angry and grieving and scared, but he was also smart and capable and desperately in need of people who would not give up on him. It took longer with Thomas. He fought them, tested them, pushed every boundary to see if they would send him back. Samuel never wavered. He worked with the boy, teaching him everything about running a ranch, giving him responsibility and trust. Zelda fed him, clothed him, and loved him through every angry outburst and sullen silence. The day Thomas called Samuel Pa for the first time, Samuel had to walk away for a moment. When he came back, his eyes were red, and he hugged the boy so hard Thomas laughed. Their family grew in other ways too. Charlie married a schoolteacher from Flagstaff and brought her to live on the ranch. Tom's daughter returned from California with her 2 children after her husband died, and they moved into a small house. Samuel helped build on the property. The ranch became a community, people looking out for each other, sharing meals and joy and the hard work of building lives in hard country. Zelda sometimes thought about her brother Thomas and Martha, wondered if they ever regretted leaving her behind. She hoped they were well, but she did not waste energy on bitterness. They had given her the greatest gift possible, even if they did not mean to. They had forced her to find her own way, which led her straight to Samuel and the life she was meant to have. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel took her up to a ridge overlooking the ranch. They sat on their horses and looked down at the house, the barns, the corrals. Smoke rose from the chimney. Zelda could see Jacob teaching Sarah to rope a fence post while Thomas mended tack on the porch. "I want to tell you something," Samuel said. "When Rebecca died, I thought my life was over. I thought I would just work until I died, and that would be enough. I never imagined I could be happy again." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes soft. "Then I found you, and you did not just make me happy, Zelda. You made me whole. You gave me a family I did not know I could have. You taught me that love is not about what someone can give you. It is about who someone is and who you are when you are with them." Zelda blinked back tears. "You saved my life that day on the road, in every way that matters." "No," Samuel said gently. "We saved each other." They rode back down to the ranch hand in hand, toward the house full of children and noise and life. Toward the home they had built together, not from blood but from choice and love, and the understanding that family is what you make it. That evening, after the children were in bed, Samuel pulled Zelda onto the porch. The Arizona sky was huge and black above them, scattered with more stars than she could count. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling the solid beat of his heart against her back. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. Zelda thought about the girl who had been left beside a road with nothing but a carpet bag and broken dreams. She thought about the woman she had become, surrounded by love and purpose and the kind of happiness she had not dared imagine. "Yes," she said, "I am happier than I ever thought possible." Samuel kissed her temple. "Good, because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." And he did. Years passed in the way they do, marked by seasons and small moments that added up to a life. Jacob grew tall and strong, eventually taking over much of the ranch work from Samuel. He married a girl from town and built his own house on the property, giving Zelda and Samuel grandchildren to spoil. Sarah became a teacher, fierce and loving, who opened a school on the ranch for the children of the workers and the families nearby. Thomas learned everything there was to know about horses and started a breeding program that became famous throughout the territory. Zelda and Samuel grew older together, their hair graying, their faces weathering, but the love between them only deepening with time. They sat together on the porch most evenings, watching the sun set over land they had tamed and loved. They held hands like young lovers and finished each other's sentences like old friends. Eleanor Williams remained a fixture in their lives, bringing news of children who needed homes. Over the years, Zelda and Samuel helped place dozens more, opening their home when needed, supporting adoptions, providing resources. The ranch became known as a place where broken things could be made whole, where family meant something more than blood. Zelda kept in contact with some of the families from the wagon train, though never with her brother. She heard eventually that Thomas and Martha had made it to California, that they were doing well. She was glad for them, but felt no particular connection to that old life. Her real family was here, built from dust and determination, and love that asked for nothing but gave everything. On their 20th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought together seemingly half of Arizona territory. The house and yard were full of people, all of them connected in some way to the web of community and care that Zelda and Samuel had woven. There was food and music and dancing, laughter ringing out under the desert stars. Late in the evening, when the party was winding down, Samuel pulled Zelda away from the crowd. They walked out to the barn, to the same spot where he had first told her he loved her all those years ago. 20 years, Samuel said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like you have been with me forever. Both are true, Zelda said, taking his hands. We have lived a whole lifetime together, Samuel, and I would not change a single moment. Not even the part where you were stranded in the desert, she smiled. Especially not that part. That is when my real life began. Samuel pulled her close, and they swayed together to the distant music, the same way they had danced at their wedding, the same way they would dance for many years to come. Around them, the ranch hummed with life and love and the deep satisfaction of knowing they had built something that would outlast them. Thank you, Samuel whispered into her hair, for saying yes, for trusting me, for making me remember how to be alive. Thank you, Zelda whispered back, for seeing me, for wanting me, not despite who I am, but because of it, for teaching me that being barren does not mean being empty. They stood there in the barn as the moon rose, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that was bigger than either of them. Behind them, their children laughed. Around them, their land stretched into the darkness, solid and real and theirs. The morning after the anniversary celebration, Zelda woke to find Samuel already up and dressed. She joined him in the kitchen, where he was making coffee with the slightly chaotic method he employed when she was not supervising. Could not sleep, she asked, kissing his cheek. Too much excitement yesterday, he said, but his eyes were soft. I was thinking about everything, about how lucky I have been. We have been, she corrected. They took their coffee out to the porch, a morning ritual they had maintained for 2 decades. The sun was just starting to paint the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold. In the distance, Zelda could see Jacob already working, could hear Sarah's voice calling to her own children to wake up. I have been thinking, Samuel said, about expanding the east pasture. Jacob thinks we could run another 100 head of cattle out there if we put in a new water system. Zelda smiled. Even after all these years, he was still planning, still building. That sounds like a good idea. I also thought, he continued, a different note in his voice now, that we might add another room to the house. Make space for when the grandchildren visit. They are getting too big to all squeeze into one room. Samuel Garrett, are you getting soft in your old age? He grinned, an expression that still made her heart skip after all this time. Maybe I am, but I like having them here. I like this house being full. So do I, Zelda admitted. Remember when it was just you rattling around in here alone? I try not to, Samuel said quietly. Those were dark years before you." She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the ranch wake up. Tom emerged from his daughter's house, heading toward the barn. Charlie and his wife were up, smoke rising from their chimney. The whole property was coming to life. All these people connected by work and kinship, and the choice to build something together. Leaner Williams arrived unexpectedly a week later, bringing news of another child. This time it was a baby, barely 3 months old, whose mother had died in childbirth and whose father was nowhere to be found. "I know you are not as young as you once were," Eleanor said apologetically, "but I thought of you first. He needs a home." Zelda looked at Samuel. They were in their 40s now, their children mostly grown. Taking an infant would mean sleepless nights and years of care before he was old enough to be independent. "We will take him," Samuel said without hesitation. The baby came home with them that afternoon. They named him Daniel, and he knit together the final piece of their family in a way none of them had expected. Jacob's children had a new uncle to dote on. Sarah spent hours rocking him and singing lullabies. Thomas carved toys for him, beautiful little horses and cattle. Zelda discovered that caring for an infant in her 40s was different from how she imagined it would have been in her 20s, but it was no less joyful. Daniel was sunny and sweet, quick to smile, fascinated by everything. Samuel was besotted, carrying the baby everywhere, showing him the ranch as if he could understand. "I never thought I would do this again," Samuel admitted one night as he walked Daniel around the darkened room, soothing him back to sleep. "I never thought I would have the chance." Zelda watched them from the bed, her heart so full it ached. "Are you happy we said yes?" "Happier than I can say." Daniel grew into a bright, energetic boy who kept everyone on their toes. By the time he was 5, he could ride better than most adults and had a special gift with animals. He followed Thomas everywhere, learning about horses, and Thomas taught him with the same patient care Samuel had once shown him. The ranch prospered. Samuel's business sense and Jacob's hard work transformed it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. They weathered droughts and hard winters, rustlers and illness, but they survived everything because they faced it together. Zelda's kitchen became famous throughout the region. She fed whoever showed up at her table, from drifting cowboys to traveling preachers to families passing through on their way to somewhere else. Her home was known as a place where the door was always open, where kindness was currency, where broken people could start to heal. She thought sometimes about the doctor in St. Louis who had told her she would never have a family. She wished she could tell him how wrong he had been. She had a family larger and more loving than she had ever imagined, not through the workings of her womb, but through the capacity of her heart. On a warm spring evening when Daniel was 10, and the ranch was alive with new calves and foals, Zelda stood in her kitchen preparing dinner for what seemed like an army. Jacob and his family would be there, Sarah and her husband, Thomas and the young woman he was courting, Charlie and his wife and their 3 children, Tom and his extended family. 20 people at least, all connected through choice and love. Samuel came in and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "About the day you found me on that road," Zelda said. "About how lost I was." "I found exactly who I was meant to find," Samuel said. "The woman who would save me right back." She turned in his arms to face him. There was gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "Do you remember what you said to me in the barn? Before we married?" "I said a lot of things in that barn." "You said you did not want me because I might give you children. You wanted me because of who I was, because I made you happy." She cupped his face in her hands. "That is what love should be, not what someone can provide, but who they are." I was right too, Samuel said. You did give me children. Just not the way anyone expected. The dinner that night was loud and chaotic and perfect. Children ran between the tables set up in the yard. Conversations overlapped, laughter rang out, and the smell of good food filled the air. Zelda looked around at all these people, her people, and felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. After everyone had eaten and the sun was setting, Daniel climbed into Zelda's lap even though he was getting too big for it. "Ma, can you tell the story?" "What story is that?" she asked, though she knew. "About how you and Pa met. It had become a family legend, told and retold until it had taken on an almost mythical quality. But Zelda never tired of telling it because it was her story, the moment everything changed. "Well," she began, and everyone quieted to listen even though they had heard it 100 times. "I was walking along a dusty road in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but a carpetbag and not much hope. And then I heard hoofbeats and I turned around and there was your pa on a big bay horse." "And he saved you," Daniel said contentedly. "We saved each other," Zelda corrected, meeting Samuel's eyes across the yard. "That is how the best stories work." As the stars came out above them, the family lingered, reluctant to end the evening. These were the moments that mattered, Zelda thought. Not the grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but these ordinary evenings surrounded by people you loved. Eventually, everyone drifted home or to bed. Zelda and Samuel were left alone on the porch, his arm around her shoulders, her head on his chest. 25 years, Samuel said. "Can you believe it?" "It feels both longer and shorter," Zelda said. "Like we have always been together and like we just started." "If I could go back and tell my younger self about all this," Samuel said, gesturing at the ranch, the house, the land, "I do not think he would believe it. He was so lost, so convinced he would never be happy again. If I could go back and tell the woman on that road that everything would turn out like this, she would not believe it either," Zelda said. "She thought she was worthless. She thought being barren meant being nothing." "Shows what we both knew," Samuel said dryly. Zelda laughed, tilting her face up to kiss him. Even after all these years, the touch of his lips made her feel young and cherished and entirely alive. They sat together until the moon rose high and bright, painting the land silver. Inside the house, they could hear Daniel's soft snores from his room. On the other side of the property, lights glowed in Jacob's house, in Sarah's, in all the places where their family had taken root and grown. "I love you," Samuel said. "Just in case I have not mentioned it today." "You mentioned it at breakfast, at lunch, and about an hour ago," Zelda said. "But I never get tired of hearing it. Good, because I plan to keep saying it until my last breath." "And I will keep believing it," Zelda said softly. "Thank you for that gift. For teaching me I was worth loving exactly as I am." "You taught me the same thing," Samuel said. "We are quite a pair." "The best pair," Zelda agreed. They went inside together, checking on Daniel one last time before retiring to their own room. As Zelda changed for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. She was not young anymore, her body marked by years and hard work. But her eyes were bright, her smile genuine. She looked like a woman who was deeply, profoundly happy. Samuel came up behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You are so beautiful. You are biased. Maybe. But I am also right." He kissed her neck and she leaned back into him. They made love with the ease and familiarity of long practice, knowing exactly how to please each other, how to give and receive joy. Afterward, Zelda lay in Samuel's arms and listened to his heart beat slow into the rhythm of sleep. She thought about family and love, and all the paths that had led her here. She thought about the doctor who had told her she was broken, about James who had rejected her, about Thomas and Martha who had abandoned her. She felt no anger toward any of them. They had simply been unable to see past their own limitations. Samuel had seen her truly, had wanted her for who she was, not what she could provide. And in doing so, he had given her something more valuable than children. He had given her back herself. Zelda closed her eyes and drifted toward sleep, safe and warm and surrounded by love. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more of the beautiful ordinary life they had built together. But tonight, she simply rested in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. The years continued to pass, each one adding new threads to the tapestry of their lives. Jacob took over more and more of the ranch operations as Samuel aged, though Samuel never fully retired. He was out checking fences and cattle well into his 60s, refusing to let age slow him down too much. Sarah's school grew, eventually becoming an official institution with funding from the territorial government. She taught children from all over the region, instilling in them the same values her parents had taught her: kindness, hard work, and the understanding that family was about choice as much as blood. Thomas married the young woman he had been courting, and they started their own horse ranch adjacent to Samuel and Zelda's property. His horses were known for their intelligence and temperament, sought after by cavalry officers and ranchers throughout Arizona and beyond. Daniel, their youngest, showed an unexpected talent for mechanics. When automobiles started appearing in the territory, he was fascinated, taking them apart and putting them back together. Samuel shook his head in bewilderment, but Zelda encouraged him, recognizing that the world was changing and their children needed to change with it. Eleanor Williams passed away when Zelda was in her mid-50s, but not before telling her that she had helped place over 200 children into loving homes over the years, many of them directly because of the example Samuel and Zelda had set. "You showed people what was possible," Eleanor said in one of their last conversations. "You proved that love is bigger than biology." More grandchildren came, then great-grandchildren. The ranch land was divided but stayed in the family, each of their children building their own lives while remaining connected to the place that had given them roots. The community they had built became a legacy that extended far beyond Samuel and Zelda themselves. When Zelda was 62, she received a letter from California. It was from Martha's daughter, her niece, explaining that both Thomas and Martha had passed, but before they died, they had spoken often of Zelda. Martha particularly had expressed regret for what they had done, for leaving her sister-in-law alone and helpless. Zelda read the letter sitting on her porch, tears streaming down her face. Samuel found her there and read it himself. "You want to write back?" he asked gently. "I think I do," Zelda said. "Not with anger, but maybe to let them know I understand, that I forgave them a long time ago, that their choice led me to you, and I cannot regret anything that did that." She wrote a long letter to her niece, telling her story, inviting her and her family to visit if they ever came through Arizona. Several months later they did, and Zelda found herself welcoming family she had never met, showing them the life she had built from the ruins of abandonment. Her niece's eyes filled with tears as she looked around at the ranch, at the obvious love and prosperity. "Grandmother spoke of you with such regret toward the end. She said leaving you was the worst thing she ever did. Tell her ghost I am at peace with it," Zelda said. Everything turned out exactly as it should have. Through it all, Samuel remained her constant. They aged together, their bodies growing slower but their love never diminishing. He still kissed her every morning and every night. He still told her she was beautiful. He still looked at her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw another enormous celebration. The ranch was packed with people, Generations of family and friends gathered to honor the couple who had built something lasting from dust and determination. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had gone home, Samuel took Zelda's hand and led her away from the remaining crowd. They walked slowly, their steps not as steady as they once were, to the ridge where they had sat on horses 40 years ago. Now they sat on a bench Jacob had built there for them, looking down at the ranch spread out below. Lights twinkled in houses, smoke rose from chimneys. The land was settled and tamed, marked by the work of their hands and the hands of their children. 40 years, Samuel said. We have been together longer than we were apart. Best 40 years of my life, Zelda said. She leaned against him and he wrapped his arm around her. Even in their 60s, she still felt safe and cherished in his embrace. Mine too, you know what I think about sometimes. What? That day I found you on the road, what if I had ridden past? What if I had not stopped? But you did stop, Zelda said. That is what matters. I stopped because something told me to, like a voice in my head saying this matters, pay attention. I have always believed that was Rebecca sending me to you, giving me permission to live again. Zelda had not heard him speak Rebecca's name in years. She squeezed his hand. I think she would be happy with the life you built, with the man you became again. I hope so. I like to think she and your parents are somewhere watching all this, pleased that we found each other. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Below them, their family gathered, their legacy visible in every building and fence and tree. You have any regrets? Samuel asked. Zelda considered the question seriously. I regret the pain I caused my parents by not being able to give them grandchildren in the traditional way. I regret that James was too small-minded to see past his own needs, but the actual events, no. Everything led me here and I would not trade this life for anything. Even if you could go back and change things, even if you could have children of your own body, no, Zelda said firmly. Because these are my children. Jacob, Sarah, Thomas, Daniel, and all their children and grandchildren. They are mine in every way that matters, and I would not risk losing even one of them to change the past. Samuel kissed her temple. You are an extraordinary woman, Zelda Garrett. I am a woman who was loved by an extraordinary man, she corrected. That made all the difference. They made their way back down to the house as full darkness fell, moving slowly but together. At the door, Samuel paused and turned to her. I want you to know something. The day I found you on that road, I thought I was saving you, but you saved me just as much, maybe more. I was barely living before you, just going through motions. You taught me how to live again, how to love again, how to build something that mattered. We built it together, Zelda said. That is the secret. We did not need each other to be complete. We were already whole, but together we were more, we still are. Together we are more, Samuel repeated. I like that. They went inside to rejoin their family, surrounded by noise and love and the beautiful chaos of a life well lived. And as Zelda looked around at all these people, at the home she had made, at the man who had chosen her when everyone else had rejected her, she felt complete and utterly content. Samuel Garrett had looked at her 40 years ago, dusty and desperate on a lonely road, and seen not what she lacked but what she was. He had wanted her not despite her inability to bear children, but because of who she was as a person. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift, permission to see herself the same way. They had built a family together, not from blood but from love. They had created a legacy that would outlast them both. And they had proved that worth was not measured in children born but in lives touched, love given, and the courage to build something beautiful from broken pieces. As the evening wound down and they finally went to bed, Zelda fell asleep in Samuel's arms one more time. grateful for every single day they had been given together. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, but tonight she had everything she needed right here. A man who loved her, a family that chose her, and a home built on the unshakable foundation of two hearts that had recognized each other in the wilderness and refused to let go. Outside, the Arizona night stretched vast and star-filled above the ranch. Inside, two people who had found each other against all odds slept peacefully, knowing they had built something that would endure long after they were gone. Love, real love, was not about what you could provide someone else. It was about seeing each other truly, choosing each other daily, and building a life that honored both people completely. Samuel had taught Zelda that her worth was not in her womb. Zelda had taught Samuel that his life was not over when his first love died. Together, they had created something bigger than either of them alone. A family, a legacy, and a love story that would be told around dinner tables for generations to come. The story of two broken people who found each other on a dusty road in Arizona, who chose to build rather than give up, who proved that family was not about blood but about love and choice, and the daily decision to show up for each other no matter what came. It was a story with a happy ending, hard-won and deeply earned. And it was true.